Hey YouTube, Kira Twig here, bringing you all my Iron Chain Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck profile. Out of all the decks that I have done recently for crazy deck ideas, this is definitely one of the most under-supported decks out there. This was a deck used by Armstrong in the 5Ds anime while Yusei was in the facility. It was a very interesting deck that focused on sending cards from your opponent's deck to the graveyard, basically attempting to deck them out with his style of playing. And like I said, we haven't really gotten any support for this set since it was originally released in the Crossroads of Chaos booster set. If we ever get at least maybe one card for this deck, it'll definitely be the most surprising, support ever, since there have been a lot of decks that have just gone overlooked. But this deck only had one booster pack of support ever, and it's been well over 10 years since, these cards initially came out. But let's go ahead. I did my best attempt of what an Iron Chain deck would look like. And just so you all know, the chain part of this name doesn't have anything to do with actual, chaining in Yu-Gi-Oh! It's all just different, names for these cards. So without further ado, like I said, let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. So for the Iron Chain monsters, probably the best one we have in the entire deck is Iron Chain Repairman. When this card destroys a monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard, you inflict 300 damage to your opponent, and once per turn, you can special summon one level 4 lower Iron Chain monster from your graveyard, except for Iron Chain Repairman. This card cannot attack the turn you activate this effect. So you have two differing effects with this card, basically meaning he can either attack and deal damage to your opponent, and additional effect damage to your opponent as well, or you can special summon a resource onto the field and then go, let's say, for like an extra deck play using what you just summoned back out onto the field using this card. So very situational depending on what you want to use with this card. And what I also found weird is the main synchro monster in our deck, which is Iron Chain Dragon, can't even initially be made with this card and our go-to tuner. We have to rely on the level 3 monsters with our tuner to summon out our main boss synchro monster in the deck, with our tuner being Iron Chain Coil. And it's a level 3 tuner, just like I said, with Iron Chain Repairman being a level 4, Iron Chain Dragon being a level 6. They just don't match up. The next card, I'm guessing, is what the main focus was for the Synchro Summon, with Iron Chain Coil to be summoned out with. But with this card, once per turn, you can select one Iron Chain monster you control to have it gain 300 attack and defense, as long as this card remains up on the field. Very, very underwhelming, but it's our tuner, which we use in the deck, so that's our main focus of it. Altogether, making it so we have options for our synchro plays, link plays. Even if you special summon with Iron Chain Repairman, you don't necessarily have to go for a synchro play with the two of them. You can even go for a link play in the extra deck now, which I'm pretty sure they had no idea would be a thing with this deck when it originally came out. But once again, just running 3 of it since it's our main go-to tuner. And the card that more than likely you synchro with using Iron Chain Coil would be Iron Chain Snake, since they are both level 3 monsters. During your main phase, you can equip this card to one face-up monster your opponent controls. That monster loses 800 attack and defense, and when it is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, its controller sends cards equal to its level from the top of their deck to the graveyard. So with this is our first initial setup for sending cards from our opponent's deck to their graveyard for that setup. And I just want to focus mostly on the Iron Chain plays in the deck. That's why we're running 3 of this card as well, and being able just to have that attack lowering along with the power boost of Iron Chain Coil, I believe, was the main play that you were meant to do with these cards, making it so you can make your cards strong enough and your opponent's monsters weak enough for your Iron Chain Repairman to attack over that monster and then deal additional damage to it using this card. For the last of our Iron Chain monsters, yes, there's only 4 in total for the deck, and that one is Iron Chain Blaster, a warrior monster as well. Once per turn, you can send one Iron Chain monster you control to the graveyard to inflict 800 damage to your opponent. So along with the Iron Chain Repairman play, my guess is you would summon out Iron Chain Repairman, use it to special summon Iron Chain Blaster, and then since your Repairman can't, attack the turn you use this, you would tribute it with your Iron Chain Blaster, sending it to the graveyard to inflict additional damage to your opponent with this card. It all works very, very strangely together. It's almost like these cards were not meant to be used together, but that's the main focus of the deck and all the cards that Armstrong used during the anime against Yusei. But for some additional support to actually make the deck somewhat playable for monsters, I'm running 3 Crane Crane. For the actual graveyard setup, I considered Needleworm. It's a little more difficult of a card for people to get access to. It has has actually been reprinted recently. Crane at least allows you to special summon a level 3 monster in your graveyard onto the field. Its effects are negated, but you're mostly going to use it for resources anyway. And we have targets like Iron Chain Snake and our tuner Iron Chain Coil, which with Crane and Iron Chain Coil, you have the options for special summoning that monster. Its effects are negated, but you still can go for the level 6 synchro play using your Crane and that other monster from the graveyard. And then lastly, for more of our hand setup, I run 3 Marauding Captain. With this one, your opponent cannot target face-up warrior monsters for attacks except this one, which can potentially protect your Iron Chain Blaster and your Iron Chain Repairman as well. And when this card is normal summon, you can special summon 1 level 4 or lower monster from your hand, which applies to all of the additional monsters that we're running in the deck. So just more and more setup from our hand onto the field. And once again, going off of Iron Chain Coil, it can go for our basically Iron Chain Dragon synchro play, being these 2 monsters are both level 3 and adding up to our level 6 summon. And that is it for the monsters. Like I said, I want to stay mostly focusing on the extra deck summonings you'll be doing with this deck and summoning out your main boss monster. For the spells, the only spells that Iron Chains got support for was this continuous spell called Poison Chain. During the end phase of your turn, if you did not attack, your opponent sends cards equal to the number of face-up Iron Chain monsters you control from the top of their deck to the graveyard. So depending on the deck you're playing against, you could either, help your opponent with their plays or take away important cards from them. It's just the setup you would do with this card, and the more Poison Chains you have, the more cards they'll send. So if you can set up multiples of this card, it just means they'll have more and more cards to send with the more Iron Chain monsters you have on the field. So either you'll go for your extra deck synchro play for your Iron Chain Dragon, or if you have a bunch of them on the field, you might just want to keep them out because then you'll mill more and more cards with Poison Chain. The best play you could potentially do, I would say, is have the field full of Iron Chain monsters, having all 3 Poison Chains, because you could potentially send 15 cards in your opponent's deck, but that's if, and I'd like to see the deck you're playing against using this card for that mill. Like I said, very unlikely, but still adding it into the deck for that play. And the fact that we need more normal summon setup, I also run 2 double summon, just with the fact that you can normal summon your Crane for the additional special summon, and also give you the resources for your Marauding Captain when it's normal summon to get more and more Iron Chain monsters. And if you use this card with those ones and have Poison Chain set up, it just makes for a more possible outcome for you to summon out those monsters. For more of the recycle power as well, because you can go through your monsters pretty quickly, I run 2 Pot of Avarice, just recycle and draw power for all your different monsters, including your extra deck monsters, back into the deck to draw 2 cards. And I just like the 2 of them for those options. Like I said, you can quickly go through extra deck plays and your main deck monsters, so being able to rely on those for the recycle is a big help for sure. For the one-of spells I run 1 Call by the Grave. I've said it plenty of times before, just Graveyard Disruption against your opponent. I run 1 Instant Fusion. You just need those additional monsters, depending on what the level may be. You have a bunch of different options in this deck to summon out extra deck monsters using those fusion monsters you summon off of Instant Fusion. I also run 1 Reinforcements of the Army. You can either go for your Marauding Captain search, or the fact that your Iron Chain Repairman is a warrior monster, and so is your Iron Chain Blaster, depending on which one you might want for the play. Also, 1 Reasoning. You run plenty of different level monsters in this deck. Repairman, Blaster, Coil, all ranging from 2, 3, and 4, making it a true guessing game on what your opponent might declare for this, because then either they'll set up, let's say, Iron Chain Coil in your graveyard, and then with that play, you can even just have potential to summon it back onto the field, with 3 being the majority we run in the deck. But once again, graveyard setup is a big risk they'll have to take with this one. I also run 1 Harpy's Feather Duster, back row clearing, pretty self-explanatory with this one. Also 1 Foolish Burial for more graveyard setup of Iron Chain Coil to special summon onto the field, and 1 Monster Reborn resources back onto the field. The more and more Iron Chains you have, the better chance you have for setting up your Poison Chain play and making your opponent send more and more cards from the top of their deck to the graveyard. It almost feels like Armstrong had more cards to make this deck fully work, for sure, in the anime, but I don't know, maybe he was just, was using a pretty bad deck. It was a pre-constructed one with all of the inmates, cards at the facility, so I think he just had 1 play going for him. If he had his actual Synchron deck, it definitely would have been a much better setup for sure. sure. But the fact that Armstrong still lost to the mismatch of different cards shows, how underwhelmed this deck is and how it definitely needs more support for it to be truly, truly playable. For the traps, now we're running 3. There can only be 1. You are running a good amount of different types of monsters in this deck, so this might be the one beneficial part of having a warrior and also a reptile and also a machine type monster as all your different types you run. And the fact that Iron Chain Dragon is also a dragon type means that you can have all these on the field and still go for that summon and not be limited to your plays, but definitely shutting down a lot of cards your opponent may have in their deck. And then for the rest of the lineup, I also run 3 Solemn Strike and 2 Solemn Judgment, just the Solemn Brigade. I thought of Infinite Impermanence, but running that card in this deck just made me feel like I was trying too much to be meta relevant. At least a lot more people have the Solemn lineup for this deck, so if you want to at least try and protect some of your monsters, these are the best cards to do so for sure, since you don't really use life points too much in this deck either. But that is it for the main deck. We'll now move on to the extra deck. Our main go-to boss monster is Iron Chain Dragon. I believe this card saw way more play than its actual, main deck counterpart in a lot of decks when early synchro monsters were released. You just need a tuner and a non-tuner to make it. You can remove from play all Iron Chain monsters from your graveyard to have this card gain 200 attack for each card removed until the end phase. And when this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent, send the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck to the graveyard. So this one especially helps for that setup. I might even consider running a second copy of this card in the deck just for, more potential for those synchro summons. If you were to run a second copy, I'll show you what card to take out of the extra deck. For the additional level 6s, I run 1 Vulcan the Divine and 1 Stardust Charge Warrior. You can potentially take out Vulcan the Divine. I like it for the bounce effect with our continuous spell, but when it comes to having a second Iron Chain Dragon, I would definitely prefer that over this card. And Stardust Charge Warrior is just another easy level 6 to make while giving us draw power and more offensive capabilities against our opponent. And the fact that Iron Chain Repairman and Coil would be, a level 7 synchro, I ran a majority more of those in the deck. So 1 Black Rose Dragon, 1 F.A. Dawn Dragster, 1 Darkstrike Fighter, remember the errata with this card as well, and 1 Trishula, Dragon of the Ice Barrier, Repairman, Blaster, and Coil, equal level 9, so you can have that set up. It makes for a pretty good synchro monster to summon out. And then for the Link monsters, I can't believe I'm running Crystron Halqifibrax in an Iron Chain deck, but there are tuners in the deck that you can summon out using this card, giving you more resources on the field for the fact they'd be a level 3 or lower tuner as well. When this card is Link summoned, just giving you Coil that much faster on the field by using more and more of your Iron Chains and setting them up in the graveyard for you to potentially summon out with your Iron Chain Dragon. I also run 1 Nightmare Phoenix, 1 Nightmare Cerberus, 1 Nightmare Unicorn, 1 Borreload Dragon, and for the instant fusion targets, I might be running too many of these. If you want to add additional synchros, you can just drop the number of fusion monsters you're running. So the 1 Dragoness, the Wicked Knight, the 1 Carbonala Warrior, and the 1 Sea Monster Theseus, all just including Theseus being a tuner monster, just adjusted levels since we are running a pretty differing level lineup for all of our Iron Chain monsters to go into the different extra deck monster plays as well. And then as for the go-to plays, as I said before, if you have your initial setup, if you can get your Iron Chain Coil into the graveyard, so a card, let's say like Foolish Burial, sending Coil to the graveyard and then summoning out your Iron Chain Repairman can give you a level 7 synchro play, but also the main one would be summoning out Crane, special summoning Iron Chain Coil onto the field. Its effects are negated, so remember it won't be able to get that boost, but then being able to use the 2 to synchro out into your Iron Chain Dragon on the field, potentially being able to boost this card's attack if you have even more Iron Chains in the graveyard, and then also making your opponent send more and more cards to the graveyard as well from that play. Also, with the go-to, let's say you have the Marauding Captain, and also, let's say your Iron Chain Coil summoned out. If you summon these 2 cards out with that play, you can then go for your Crystron Halqifibrax play, and then using this card when it is Link summoned to summon out another Iron Chain Coil from your hand or deck onto the field. It cannot activate its effects, but it's not that big of a problem. And then also being able to banish this card and special summon 1 Tuner Synchro, but you're going to avoid that fact because now with this play, if you open up the double summon play with this additional normal summon onto your field, if you go for your Iron Chain Snake, that'll also be the requirements for your Iron Chain Dragon. And not only will you have the Halqifibrax with the Iron Chain Dragon setup, which like I said, you're not limited to where you can summon this card out, but using this play beforehand and having the additional cards for the setup in your play, you can remove from play all Iron Chains, which will give you the additional 3 in your graveyard to banish, making so this card gains the additional attack power to hit over over a good number of cards your opponent may have, and once again, sending more and more cards to their from their deck to the graveyard as well. So that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoy the video. I definitely had a lot of fun looking at all the Iron Chain Dragons. They definitely held a lot of nostalgia for sure. But like I said, it definitely would need more and more support to make it an actual true playable deck altogether in today's current Yu-Gi-Oh! But anyone looking to build the Iron Chain deck, this is my take on probably what the most, Iron Chain focused deck would look like for sure. But until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and Kira Twig out.